What is up, guys? Randomonium here with your Week 9 Fantasy LCS predictions. In this video, I'm going to break down all of the matchups for NA and EU LCS for Week 9, and a spoiler warning is definitely in effect for all of the Week 8 matches. I will be discussing some of them, so if you haven't seen some of the games and you don't want the results spoiled, this is your spoiler warning. And it definitely feels like it's been forever since I've done a video, and I just had dental surgery. That's why I haven't been making videos, and talking is rather difficult for me right now, so I'm going to try and make this video as short as possible, and hopefully it's pretty clear and I don't mumble my words too much. But let's kind of just go right into Week 9. So as normal, we've got the standard system where I'm going to break down each of the teams and all of the players into S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. And these tiers basically are just going to break down who I think is going to get the most points. It's not necessarily saying that an S tier team is better than an A tier team. It's just saying that this week an S tier team will get more points than an A tier team on average. So for the teams for S tier, I have Immortals, Vitality, H2K, and G2. Immortals is going up against TSM and Team Impulse. I think it'll be a relatively easy week for them, and they should be able to rack up a lot of points. The same can be said for Vitality. They're going up against Rockcat and Splice. H2K has a little bit of a harder week with Unicorns of Love and Fnatic, but they should be able to go 2-0. And G2 has a relatively easy week with Splice and Unicorns of Love. The other teams that will be going 2-0 this week, I think, are going to be CLG, Cloud9, and Origin. That's why they are my A-tier teams. I think that the most controversial of those on that list is going to be Origin because they're going up against Fnatic this week. The reason why I think that Origin is probably going to beat Fnatic is because Xpeke is going to be their starting mid laner. I feel like Origin is a much stronger team with Xpeke at mid lane, and I think that's going to be the difference in the Origin versus Fnatic matchup. For my B tier teams, I've got Team Liquid, Fnatic, and TSM. I think that all of these teams will go 1-1, and they should be able to rack up some decent fantasy points, but they won't be able to rack up as many as necessarily the 2-0 teams. I think that there will be a little bit of controversy on TSM. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat Immortals, but I do think that they're going to be able to beat NRG, which I think some people might find controversial. TSM has looked horrible in Week 8, but I think they're going to kind of circle the wagons. They're going to hunker down. They're going to figure out what's wrong. And they're going to come out guns blazing in Week 9, and they're going to have some really strong showings to kind of put a stamp on the end of the season and really kind of cement their spot in the playoffs. So I do think that TSM will be able to go 1-1 this week. For the C tier teams, I've got Team Renegades, Echo Fox, Rockcat, Energy, and Unicorns of Love. As we discussed with TSM, I do think that Energy will lose to TSM, and I also think that Energy will lose to CLG. That said, I do think that it's possible that Energy beats TSM, which would definitely allow them to get more fantasy points, so they could possibly be a B tier team this week. One team that I'm definitely very excited about is Renegades. They started off the season very poorly, but with the recent additions of Seraph and Ninja, that team looks much stronger. They had a really good showing last week. They racked up a lot of fantasy points. I think that this week they will also rack up a lot of fantasy points. But that said, I do think that Echo Fox will beat them, though they will be able to beat Team Impulse. One team that I'm not very impressed with right now is Unicorns of Love. They were one of the top teams in EU, but they feel like they are not evolving as fast as a lot of the other teams. They're starting to fall further and further behind. And this week they've got H2K and G2 on their plate, and I don't think they're going to have a shot against either of those teams. I think that H2K and G2 will both beat Unicorns of Love, and that one or both of those games could be a blowout, which will result in Unicorns of Love not getting many fantasy points this week. For the D tier teams, I've got Team Dignitas, Elements, Impulse, Giants, and Splice. Dignitas is definitely kind of a wild card right now. They went 0-2 last week, but they were able to rack up a ton of fantasy points. So it definitely is possible that this week they do something similar where they drag out the game. They get a lot of kills, a lot of objectives. They're able to get a lot of fantasy points. But I can't really justify putting them any higher than a D tier because I know that they're going to go to 0-2 this week, and there's definitely a probability that they get blown out by either Team Liquid or CLG. Moving on to the top lane for my S tier top laners this week, I have Huni, Cabochard, Kikis, and Odoamne. I think that all of these teams are going to go 2-0 this week, and these are basically your top dogs in top lane. Rounding out for the A tier teams, I've got Seraph, Darshan, and Balls. I know a lot of people are going to say, Seraph, what the hell? Seraph has been performing fantastic. Every single LCS game he's had, he's been racking up tons of fantasy points. Yes, he's on Renegades. Yes, Renegades is a bottom tier team, but he puts up a lot of fantasy points. I think he really is worthy of an A tier pickup right now. I'm actually substituting him in on a lot of my fantasy teams because he's just a really strong pickup that a lot of people aren't looking at right now. And I do think that Darshan and Balls are going to have very strong weeks, but they're not going to be as strong as some of the other 2-0 top laners this week. Rounding out the B tier, I've got Lorlo, Soaz, and Gamsu. Origin will be going 2-0 this week, but Soaz has not been getting that many fantasy points. And then Lorlo and Gamsu, those teams should go 1-1 this week. And I think that they should be able to get a decent amount of fantasy points. Moving on to the C tier, I have Vivisachi, Hanser, Freddy, KFO, and Impact. I think that Impact definitely could move up this list if NRG beats TSM. But I definitely am a little bit concerned about Vivisachi and Hanser. Those were two top laners that should have been much higher in the rankings, and they really have not been performing that well. They have not been producing that many fantasy points, so now that they've dropped to the C tier. So hopefully, they return back to their old ways. But right now, I can't really justify putting them any higher than C tier. And then rounding out the D tier, I've got Billy Boss, Steve, Fang, Wonderwear, and Smitty J. I think that the most likely of those top laners to move out of the D tier list would probably be Steve. He definitely has been kind of more hit and miss, but he has had some very good games where he's been kind of a B tier and A tier player. Moving on to the jungle, for the S tier, I've got Reignover, Trick, Shook, and Jankos. All of these junglers have produced tons of fantasy points every week, and I think that this week will be no different. All of these teams are going to go 2-0 this week, so if you have any of these as your starters, definitely keep them in. Rounding out the A tier, I've got Rush, Xmithy, and Dardosh. Even though the Team Liquid is going to go 1-1 this week, I do think that Dardosh is going to rack up a lot of fantasy points, enough that he might even surpass some of the 2-0 junglers this week. And then for the B tier, I've got Spirit, Lulex, and Crumbs. Lulex is up there because he's been putting up a lot of fantasy points, even though Unicorns of Love has been struggling. He's been putting up a lot of fantasy points. And then Crumbs has had a really good week last week. I think that Renegades is going to kind of have like a last-minute surge, and he should be able to get a decent amount of fantasy points this week, but not enough to put him in an A tier or an S tier pick. For the C tier, I've got Amazing, Hard, Kiri, Senskaran, and Moon. I definitely think that the jungler that could move up the most in this list is probably Moon. Energy really is still a wild card. You really don't know which Energy team is going to show up. Sometimes they look amazing, sometimes they look horrible. So I definitely think that Moon could be a worthy pickup if there are no other junglers available. And then for the D tier, I've got Proxen, Airwalks, Gilius, Trashy, and Wisdom. Okay, moving on to the mid lane, I've got Pobelter, Nuke Duck, Perks, and Jensen as my S tier picks. Jensen was definitely the fantasy point leader for one or two of the weeks. I think that Cloud9 is going to have another strong week, and he's definitely worthy of that S tier. And then I think that Pobelter, Nuke Duck, and Perks are, not unexpected. They've been racking up tons of fantasy points every week. So it's no surprise that they're on the S tier again this week. For A tier, I've got Phoenix, Ryu, and Ninja. I think people are going to kind of scratch their heads at this. I think Phoenix is going to put up a lot of points, even though Team Liquid is only going to go 1-1 this week. And I think that Ninja is going to put up a lot of points, even though Renegades is only going to go 1-1 this week. That's why I think they're worthy of that A-tier pickup. Last week they were able to get some decent amount of points, even though their teams kind of struggled a little bit. And then for the B tier, I've got Fevin, Huhi, and Froggen. Even though I think that CLG is going to go 2-0 this week, Huhi has not been getting that many points. He's been kind of more of a support mid laner and has not really been getting as many points as Xmithy or Darshan has been getting. Moving on to the C tier, I've got Xpeke, Bjergsen, Bedsy, Fox, and GBM. I know a lot of people are going to, whine and cry and scream at me that I've got Xpeke and Bjergsen all the way down at C tier, but right now that's where they're at. I mean, just from a performance perspective, I can't really justify putting them any higher than that. I know that some people think that GBM is definitely worthy to be higher as well, but he's just been really inconsistent. Sometimes he's a D tier pick, sometimes he's an S tier pick, and there's no really good way to tell which GBM is going to show up from week to week. So I got to put him around the C tier. If you feel like he's going to perform better, then feel free to start him. And then rounding out the D tier for the mid lane, I've got Shifter, Pyrene, Senkooks, Aika, and Xpepe. I definitely think that Shifter could be much higher. Last week he was an S tier pick, but his team went 0-2. So that was very odd that the Dignitas was able to rack up that many points. I definitely think it's possible that happens this week, but it's probably improbable. Alright, for ADC, for the S tier picks, I've got Wild Turtle, Emperor, Sneaky, and Hijarnan. I don't think there's going to be any surprises on this list. All of these AD carries have been performing at the top of the fantasy point list for pretty much the entire split. So I don't think there'll be any questions on that. For the A tier, I've got Sven, Piglet, and Reckles. Sven has been kind of hit or miss, but he seems like he's getting stronger and stronger as weeks go on. Piglet has been strong the entire split, but I only think that Liquid is going to go 1-1 this week, which is why Piglet is not an S tier pick. And then Reckles has definitely been improving as well. He's been getting more fantasy points recently. For the B tier, I've got Forgiven, Stixay, and Freeze. I know that a lot of people think that Forgiven is, much higher rated. They should be an S tier and A tier. But Forgiven, even though he's a great AD carry, he doesn't go for a lot of fantasy points. He's all about the win. He's not really about his stats. So I don't think that Forgiven is going to get a lot of points because he hasn't gotten that many points in the past. Stixay, the same thing can be said. He's not really the carry for CLG. It really is more Xmithy and Huhi and Darshan. He just is kind of there to deal damage. And he hasn't really been getting that many fantasy points even when CLG goes 2-0. And then Freeze, I think Freeze is obviously one of the best carries in NA or EU. He's one of the top challengers. But obviously Renegades has struggled a lot. Now that they've got Seraph and Ninja, I think that Freeze is definitely going to move up the rankings, and I think he's worthy of that B tier pickup this week. Moving on to the C tier AD carries, I've got Keith, Tabs, Double Lift, Steelback, and Alltech. I know that a lot of people are going to be disappointed that Double Lift and Alltech are on the C tier list, and probably also Steelback as well. But all three of these teams have really been struggling, so I can't really justify putting any of these AD carries in the B tier or the A tier. And then moving on to the D tier list, I've got Mr. Rallis, Apollo, Mash, Kabi, and Sunstar. Sunstar is obviously the AD carry that replaced Adri for Giants. And they just had a horrible week last week, so that's why I've got him at the bottom of the pack this week. I don't know if they're going to improve that much from one week to the next. And then finally, for our supports, for the S tier supports, I've got Adrian, Hybrid, Kasing, and Hai. Hai's been putting up a lot of fancy points every week, and I think that this week is going to be no different. Cloud9 should be able to go 2-0 this week, but the games should last relatively long, which should allow Cloud9 to get a lot of fantasy points. Adrian is an absolute beast at support, and I definitely think he's going to top out the charts. And then Hybrid and Kasing have also been doing fantastic on the EU side of things. For my A tier, I've got Aframu, Vander, and Matt. Aframu has been doing really well, but he hasn't been getting as many fantasy points as you would possibly expect from an S tier support from CLG, since they've been going 2-0 so often. And then Vander, the same thing can be said. Even though HUK is one of the top teams, Vander has not been putting up as many fantasy points as you would probably expect. But Matt definitely has. Matt has definitely been carrying his team a lot from the support role for Team Liquid. And even though Team Liquid is going to go 1-1 this week, I think that Matt is definitely worthy of that that A tier pickup. For B tier, I've got Mithy, Clash, and Hillisang. All three of these teams have struggled in the past. I do think Origin's going to go 2-0 this week. Fnatic will go 1-1, and Unicorns of Love will go 0-2. But I think they'll all get roughly around the same fantasy points this week. For C tier, I've got Hakuo, Yellowstar, Big, Conquan, and Noxiac. Renegades has definitely improved a lot. I think their carries are getting a lot of fantasy points, but I didn't see their support getting as many fantasy points. Yellowstar has been kind of hit or miss. He could be a lot higher, but he also could be a D tier pick like he was last week. And then I don't think there's going to be any other questions for Big, Conquan, or Noxiac. Then rounding out the support list, I've got Kiwi Kid, Spraddle, Nisbeth, Gate, and Godfried. Kiwi Kid had a fantastic week for week 8. I don't think the Natasha is going to replicate it in week 9, so I think he's going to go back to being kind of like bottom of the pile again, unfortunately. But it's definitely possible for Dignitas to rack up a lot more points again this week. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you like the content on the channel, please subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, if you disagree with anything that I listed, please let me know by leaving a comment. This is going to be the last video for the regular season for the spring split. I'll probably do one video for the playoffs, kind of giving my playoff predictions, and then I'm going to try and do some different content while we break between the spring split and the summer split. So if you have any suggestions, if there's any other particular videos that you would like to see, just leave a comment. I'll try to upload some different video types in the future, depending on what people want to see. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. This is Randomonium signing off.